Good day, everyone. My name is Mai Taklan, and my report will cover the discussions of Principles 5 and 6 of clear and effective writing that can help us achieve readability. So let's start with the fifth principle, which is avoid using jargon or too many technical terms. So, what are jargons? According to our textbook, jargon or technocracies are words that are understandable to people trained or who are experts in a technical or a specific field. So, they use these words to communicate precisely or with clarity. And who are these people? These people are doctors, the lawyers, the businessmen, the academics, the scientists, and many more. So, those are some of their specialty words. The second one to take note of in jargons is that it's not the same thing as slang. So, jargon is technical, it's specific to a field of expertise, and it's formal. While slang, on the other hand, is more informal, casual. It's actually colloquial language. So it would depend where that person belongs to, or let's say nationally, or where the person is located geographically. Let's say in the Philippines, there's slang. In the US, there's slang. In any other country, there would be slang, which is not equal to jargon. All right. So let's look at some of the examples of the usage of jargon in some sentences that make it hard to understand. The first one is conferences are ideal venues to interface with your colleagues. So most of the people might misinterpret what interface means. So you can simply put it as interact. Conferences are ideal venues to interact with your colleagues. The next one, the new transparent wall maintenance engineer. What a mouthful. Did a good job today. Or in simpler words, it's window cleaner. The window cleaner did a good job today. All right. And the third one, it says the management does not have the bandwidth to deal with the volume of new requests. So we usually see this in we usually hear it or see it in written emails and meetings, but in simpler terms, bandwidth means capacity. The management does not have the capacity to deal with it. And lastly, for the health sector, the medical field, if you want healthy kids, keep them away from low nutrient per calorie density foods. That was so hard to say. Anyways, if you're talking to a housewife or maybe a mother, you would want to keep it simple so that they wouldn't be scared. If you want healthy kids, keep them away from junk food or foods. So these jargons may seem or look strange to people who are not experts in certain fields, right? Because they don't have the right exposure or the same exposure or training for them to be able to get what those terms or what those words mean. So another one from our textbook is the word pan. For regular people like us, pan may simply mean frying pan, something used for cooking. But for a photographer, a professional, the same word has another meaning, which means to physically follow the movement of your subject with the camera. So I hope we can see the differences uh, or simple terms and jargons can make. So as writers, we must never assume that people are or all people would understand the context of certain words. And the best way to handle this is to explain and define the terms that you may feel that are too technical for your readers. So give them context, explain the words, define them, make it simpler and easier to understand. Which leads us to the sixth principle, which is be careful when using idioms. So, before we start, what are idioms? Most of us already know, but for those who don't, or just for Definition: idioms are figurative expressions used in everyday language. So, if jargons are used in technical spaces or professional spaces, idioms are figurative words or terms that we can use in our daily lives. So, their meanings cannot be or are not obvious, they cannot be understood just by reading the words, but you need to actually understand the context behind it, which we will be talking about later. Also, idioms bring character and vibrancy to writing. Let's say if you're writing a story, if you're writing an article, it would bring life and it could create a sense of interest or familiarity. However, there are many common idioms that are used incorrectly. So, as non native English speakers, we might be unaware that we are using the idioms inaccurately. So, like what I said earlier, the best way to understand an idiom is to see or understand its context. Here are some of the examples that our textbook provided. No parking on both sides, which is actually wrong. You should say, or a better way to say it is no parking on either side. Another one that stood out to me is birthday celebrant. So the word celebrant is actually used out of context in our daily lives. So we usually say he's the birthday celebrant. But in reality, celebrant means a person who actually officiates a ritual or a mass. And the correct term to use is celebrator, which does not sound right, but it's actually the better option. So if you can read through the other examples, you can pause the video, but I will not be reading everything. So with regard to this principle, if we are writing for something or as writers, we must be careful in choosing the correct idioms for our pieces because we are responsible in ensuring that these expressions that we use are accurate and precise. Because many people take these expressions for granted. And since a lot of people still struggle with the misuse of these expression, I think it can be related to something that is quite particular to us Filipinos, which is, or which you can call the Filipino version of English or the alteration of the English language done by Filipinos. So this isn't in our textbook, but I just wanted to include it as a bonus content because I think it might be useful to be familiar with it as well if you're not already. So, what I'm talking about is Philippinisms or colloquialisms or idiomatic expressions that are local to our country. So, because of the fact that Filipinos are great in speaking English. We speak English so well. We have managed to create our own version of the language. So often there are literal translations of Filipino phrases like take out, comfort room, but it is actually a result of common transliteration and the misuse of some English words and phrases, right? So most of the time they don't align with the standard English usage and standard English grammatical rules because they hold specific meanings that would only make sense within the Filipino context. So if let's say speakers or English speakers from other countries, they wouldn't understand it. Only the Filipinos will. So what are some examples of these? It can be first one is for a while. It's often used, let's say, in phone calls when you're or when you're ordering through drive-through at Jollibee. So you would hear for a while lang, ma'am. It's a direct translation of sandali lang po, but in standard English, it actually refers to an unspecified amount of time. It's not certain how long that while would be. But in the Filipino context, the meaning is more immediate, like agad, only saglit. And the next example is if ever, which expresses possibility, or which, but it's similar to if or in case. So it says here grammatically it's considered redundant because in English you can only use if and it will still have the same meaning. Another one is close the light, TV, or computer. But a better way to say it is turn off the light. The next one is fill up the form, where the correct way to say it is fill out the form. And lastly, very common, we use brown out, but it's actually blackout or power outage. All right. So I just wanted to add this because it may seem acceptable right now since it's widely practiced in our country. But as communicators, we need to be mindful, we need to be careful with the choice of expressions that we utilize. So, because we want to get our message across clearly, we want our intended audiences to understand what we are or what we plan to tell them. So this is done. We need to be careful to avoid any grammatical errors that may possibly lead to misconceptions or even further misunderstandings. So, in summary, I talked about two principles for clear and effective writing that help achieve readability. The first one being number 5 is to avoid using jargon or too many technical terms. Number 6, be careful when using idioms. And my bonus info on Philippinisms or literal translations of some Filipino phrases to English. So I would like to proceed to my discussion questions. I only have two. The first one is what are the main differences between jargons and idioms? The second one is are you surprised that jargons and idioms are still commonly misused or used out of context in media? Why or why not? And here are my references. So I would like to thank you for staying until this part, and I look forward to your answers, your clarifications, your discussions, and thank you so much for participating and listening. I will see you again in my next report. Thank you.